Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Andrew Seago. Um, this past summer, I had the chance to be the Travel and Research Fellow at the firm Hart Howerton in New York. And this is a fellowship they give out every year where you have the opportunity to partake in an internship with the office and take some time to go travel and research a topic of your choice at the same time. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to propose for this, I kind of collected some of my interests, which included the Garden City movement and its effects, medieval walled cities, the Ringstrasse in Vienna, the Beltline in Atlanta, and I wondered what all these things have in common and how can I pull a research topic out of this. So what I came to was these are all instances of a network of parks or green space that surround the city. And so I thought that's an idea that can sort of form the basis of what I can look at. Um, so what I did was, well, first off, coin a term, which I called park belts, because I thought about using the word green belt, but that has pre-existing connotations. It's sort of a park that's meant to constrain suburban sprawl or growth. So park belt captures the idea of a park that completely encircles or mostly encircles the urban core. And to sort of better convey this idea, I put together this kind of abstract diagram of what I was going to be looking at, and it's a spectrum from the different types of park belts that I could look at. So on the left, you have the traditional city, which is sort of a dense urban core, and outside of that is nature. And then if you imagine sort of a swath of nature encircled, then you get what I call the mantle park. And then if you imagine that there are now suburbs outside of that and the swath is smaller, you get the girdle park. And then the Breloak Boulevard. A Breloak is like a bracelet where you have the boulevard with parks attached to it. If the park's detached from that, then you have a ring boulevard. If you then reconnect the parks with some kind of green way or green path, and you have a necklace park, the ribbon park is where the parks disappear and it's just the path. And then you have sort of the paradigm modern city, which is just maybe an urban core, suburbs, and then nature outside of that, perhaps. So to study these ideas, I went 6 places: Stockholm, Cologne, Germany, Vienna, Austria, Nîmes in southern France, Paris, and Atlanta. I'll talk about each place I went, and my research included a lot of kind of history of the ideas and analysis of the ideas, but here I'm just going to talk about kind of my takeaways, which was really a sort of pattern language that I tried to draw from each place, because this research kind of has to be relevant to the work of Hart Howerton going forward, and how these ideas could be applied in real life. So the first place I went was Stockholm. And what I was looking at is the Royal National City Park, which is the first example in the world of a national urban park. It was established in the 1990s, and what you see in yellow is the area that I was looking at. It's most of it was originally the Royal Deer Garden, and over time that was kind of became a nature preserve, and there's a lot of cultural and history involved with it. But you can see the core of Stockholm is kind of down by the old town and spreading up north, and the Mantle Park kind of surrounds it. Here are some pictures to give you an idea of Stockholm. It's situated in an archipelago, so water is a very important part of the city, and also nature itself is visible from nearly everywhere in Stockholm. So one of the takeaways I had from this is just the simple idea of bringing people to the park to make it successful. This is a photo inside the park where you can see, I think, 5 or 6 different modes of transportation that are available to get into this park, such as vehicles, bicycles, the pedestrians, the tram. There's also ferries, and there's also horse and carriage, and scooters now. So all of these made it easy to get people there, and that actually brought people there, and then it felt successful because there were people there. The next place I went was Cologne, Germany, to study, I'm going to butcher this stuff, but the Grüngürtel. And so this is an interesting origin story. It was originally the area of the medieval walls that encircled Cologne. These were torn down in the 1920s and 30s and a little bit before, and replaced with this band of parks that's more or less homogeneous width that separates the kind of historic core from the outer suburbs. And I call it the Girdle Park. And so here are some pictures of that. You can see in the aerial view, it's really distinct in the city landscape. And also you can just see the variety of types of landscape that exist within it. And it's very popular with locals, but if you go there, you won't see many tourists. And one thing you can take away from Cologne is the idea of kind of not over-designing spaces, but letting people use the space first and then observing how they use it and using that to make subtle changes to improve it. From there, I went to Vienna to study the Ringstrasse, which is a paradigm example of the ring road, which is, has these parks addended to it in a very urban setting. Here's Vienna. Its most distinctive feature is just the grand architecture of Vienna and the parks themselves, which add to the grandeur, which leads to my kind of prime takeaway from Vienna, which is just the idea of kind of alternating park and building, in a sense, highlights the benefits and the effects of both. From there, I went to Nîmes in southern France, and this is a great example of a boulevard circuit where the parks are not necessarily attached to the boulevard, but they're in the city, and the boulevard stands alone. This was also a case where the boulevard stands on the place where the medieval city walls were and were taken down. But this is a much more compact example. It was a Roman city. The Maison Carrée is there, as well as a very well-preserved amphitheater. There's an incredible Renaissance park, which incorporates Roman ruins into it. But really, the part I was studying, the boulevard circuit, was a very attractive part of the city. And kind of one of the things that you notice there, I was also there during literally the hottest time ever in the history of France. It was 114 degrees. And the boulevard literally cooled the entire city, partly because it incorporates water features that the locals use as fountains for cooling off. And that's one of my takeaways, is just incorporating water elements that people can actually interact with as opposed to just look at is a huge benefit to these places. From there, I went, well, this is a little bit out of order. I went to Paris next, but the next one I'm going to talk about is the Beltline in Atlanta, because typologically it follows. Here you have the parks spread out through the city, and now they're connected with a path, or in this case, the Beltline. It's incomplete. It's in the works. Hopefully it will be finished within the next 10 or 15 years. Here's some pictures of it. Its origin is an old rail line that ran around the city of Atlanta, was mostly disused, and a graduate student at Georgia Tech proposed maybe they should turn it into some kind of path that people can use to get between the parks of Atlanta and the different neighborhoods of Atlanta. And that idea caught on. It received approval from the city, and now it's becoming a kind of a hit, or a trendy spot. And something you can notice from this is just how businesses and areas along the Beltline will adapt to it if you just sort of put in the initial investment. So the most popular restaurant on the Beltline is the back of an old warehouse, where originally that was sort of a neglected area. When people started walking past it, people realized there was an opportunity there, and it became sort of this back terrace that people go to a lot. Now I'll look at Paris. So in Paris, these are two different projects. One is the Coulée Verte, and the other is the Petite Ceinture. The second is similar to Atlanta, a rail line that ran around the city of Paris and is mostly unused. And the first one is a rail line, an elevated rail that ran from the center of Paris to the edge. So these are two examples that are comparable to the Beltline, but they're a little bit older than the Beltline. And here you can see the Coulée Verte is very popular, I'd say with locals more, but tourists are also discovering it. And it's an incredible kind of escape from the city, where you can just sort of go up on this rail and be in a garden walking through the city, and then you get peaks of the urbanism through the trees and so forth. And at some points it literally just cuts through apartment buildings. And then the Petite Ceinture is a little bit more secluded. Most of it's not open to the public yet, so it's more or less deserted. And the parts that are open are not, they're not over-designed in the sense that they're mostly left to kind of grow on their own right now. And that was a takeaway I took because those were some of the more pleasant places. Because in a city like Paris, it's difficult to find wild nature. You can find a lot of parks and gardens, but a place where really nature is winning is difficult to come by, and that was one of the most valuable parts of it for me. And then there were takeaways that were common to all these places, and these are each of the places I visited at the same scale. So one of these is just the idea of creating a jewel or a moment of hierarchical importance along the park belt was very important because that gives a place for people to converge and when you're following it, a place to stop. And then I also thought about the future of this idea and where it might go moving forward. And thinking back to when I proposed this project, one of my thoughts was that, well, looking forward in the future with the idea of self-driving cars and whatnot, it's not inconceivable that the automobile may not be as prevalent as it is now in 20 years. And if that's the case, then we have millions of acres of valuable urban real estate in the form of urban highways that run through our cities. And so it would be very forward-thinking of us to think about what to do with those places now. And I think it would be worth considering turning them into some form of linear park. So all of this will hopefully be compiled into a book in the near future. Working on that now. But I just want to say thank you, both to Art Howerton and Notre Dame, for the opportunities and any questions.
So you talk about whenever you have a park to have like a jewel or a central hierarchical moment. Do you think it's possible to have more than one, or simply stick to one? Because like I know the route you chose in Nîmes works really well because I walked that too. And but I mean like Vienna, you talked about how there's like a museum and then a park and then another monumental museum, another park.
Yeah. Even Vienna has the museum district, which I would consider the jewel along that route. But you're right, Vienna is more like a diamond necklace where there are a lot of jewels. But I still think the museum quarter forms the jewel. That's where most of the tourists are, and it's sort of a orientation spot along it. And Nîmes too has several points, but I think the arena piazza is the starting point, and it's not a coincidence that that's the first place you get to in the city if you come by train. You walk down the Esplanade and you arrive at the arena and the big piazza there. So it was just a consistent theme, but you're right, there can be more than one, but I think generally there is a predominant one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.